South Korean President Yoon is set to embark on his trip to San Francisco next week for the APEC summit to ramp up economic security. His overseas trips will also take him to the UK to meet King Charles. The U.S. has removed South Korea from its currency monitoring list on account of a fall in current account surplus. This could mean a higher level of credibility for Seoul on the global stage. Korea's current account stayed in the black for a fifth straight month in September on the back of a recovery in chip exports and cheaper import prices. It's November 8th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with a flurry of diplomacy scheduled for the South Korean leader until the year is up. Next week, President Yoon will attend the APEC summit in San Francisco, and his diplomatic engagements will also involve trips to London, Paris, and the Netherlands as he looks to increase South Korea's economic security and global leadership. Our correspondent Woo Soo-young has details.
President Yoon will look to increase Seoul's economic security and high-tech partnerships with like-minded countries, engaging in economic summitry in San Francisco and state visits to Europe. Yoon's office on Wednesday announced the President and the First Lady's upcoming trips, beginning with the Asia-Pacific Economic Partnership Summit hosted by the United States this year. Arriving in San Francisco on November 15th, Yoon will attend the APEC CEO Summit and the APEC Business Advisory Council Dialogue, among other sessions, laying out South Korea's role in global cooperation in overcoming the climate crisis, supporting the green transition, and countries vulnerable to climate change. He'll also emphasize the need for multilateral efforts to strengthen supply chains and establish digital ethical standards across the international community. The leader will also hold bilateral talks on the sidelines, as well as engage with the local Korean community and young people in high-tech industries. After returning to Seoul for the weekend, the first couple will head to London for a state visit, the first to be extended by King Charles III following his coronation. On November 21st, Yoon will meet King Charles at a welcoming ceremony to be followed by a luncheon before observing South Korea-related artifacts held at Buckingham Palace. After his royal engagements, the South Korean leader will pay his respects to Korean war veterans and at the Tomb of the Unknown at Westminster Abbey before delivering a speech at Parliament to set out the direction of bilateral relations going forward. Heading to number 10 Downing Street the next day, Yoon will hold a bilateral summit with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as the two countries produce the South Korea-UK Accord to strengthen their strategic partnership in trade, IT, cybersecurity, weapons, space and green industries, among other key sectors. Yoon will also attend various business-related events before he crosses over the English Channel to Paris, where he'll continue his appeal for South Korea's co-city of Busan to host the 2030 World Expo ahead of the decisive vote by member countries later this month. Marking his final overseas diplomacy of the year, Yoon will head to the Netherlands in mid-December, marking the first state visit to the country by a South Korean leader. During his two-day stay, he's expected to engage with the Dutch royal family, members of parliament, as well as key businesses in high-tech areas. President Yoon's diplomatic streak comes against the backdrop of the growing US-China rivalry, the ongoing war in Ukraine, and the Israel-Hamas conflict, making his multilateral engagements all the more crucial amid efforts for global and economic security as Seoul looks to act as a global pivotal state.
The APEC summit will be a chance to strengthen South Korea's diplomacy as a responsible player in the global community, while the state visit to the UK aims to strengthen strategic cooperation, particularly with key friendly nations. President Yoon has assigned Seoul with the responsibility and role of contributing to world freedom, peace and prosperity whilst attending the NATO, ASEAN and G20 summits and the UN General Assembly earlier this year.
Yoon has held 142 summits so far this year with 93 nations according to his office. Woo Soo-young, Arirang News.
President Yoon hosting his Italian counterpart Sergio Mattarella at the Yongsan presidential office for a state visit expressed his hopes for further cooperation as the two countries share the values of freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. The message was delivered before a summit between the two following a welcoming ceremony. President Matarala replied saying that cooperation needs to be extended beyond just the economy into culture, among other areas, as he invited President Yoon to visit Italy. The two also held an MOU signing ceremony, but details of this have yet to be released. The state visit comes against the backdrop of the next year, which marks 140th anniversary since diplomatic ties were established. South Korea and the U.S. military will discuss ways to bolster extended deterrence at their 55th Security Consultative Meeting to be held next week. The Ministry of National Defense announced that Minister Shin Won-sik and his U.S. counterpart Lloyd Austin will hold the annual meeting next Monday at the Defense Ministry compound in Yongsan Central, Seoul. This is their first round of talks since Shin's inauguration last month. Detailed plans to enhance extended deterrence, including the operation of the Nuclear Consultative Group, are expected to be at the top of their agenda. The foreign ministers of the Group of Seven have strongly condemned North Korea's repeated ballistic missile launches and arms transfers to Russia as a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Japan's foreign ministry says this was announced as the G7 foreign ministers discussed Indo-Pacific issues in Tokyo on Wednesday. North Korea has recently provided Russia with more than 1 million artillery rounds to use in its war in Ukraine, with Pyongyang appearing to receive technological assistance for its upcoming military spy satellite launch. The top diplomats also reaffirmed the importance of engaging with China and the need to cooperate with Beijing on global challenges and areas of common interest. Over in the Middle East, as Israel intensifies its ground operations in Gaza, its forces are now engaged in urban warfare, which could lead to even worse casualties on both sides. Cho Hee-dae has more.
About 10 days after the expansion of Israel's ground offensive in the Gaza Strip, its troops are now involved in urban warfare. Prime Minister Netanyahu made an official statement on Tuesday announcing that the Israel Defense Forces, after encircling Gaza City, was conducting urban operations inside in its month-long offensive against Hamas.
Gaza City is encircled. We are operating inside it. We are increasing pressure on Hamas every hour, every day. We have killed thousands of terrorists above ground and below ground.
Defense Minister Gov't also announced the same day that the IDF was now in the heart of the Gaza City. This is the biggest city in the central area of the Gaza Strip, and it's controlled by Hamas, which uses it as its main base. Gov't added IDF troops and combat engineers moved into the Gaza Strip from the north and south using armored vehicles and tanks. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the IDF has hit more than 14,000 Hamas targets in the region, destroyed more than 100 tunnels, and captured 4,000 weapons which is said were hidden in civilian infrastructure. He reiterated Israel's stance of no ceasefire, despite international calls for a humanitarian pause in the fighting. With Israel's ground offensive in the Gaza Strip becoming official, the United States and Israel have expressed differences over the issue of Palestine governance after the war. Washington warned once more against the reoccupation of Gaza following Netanyahu's comments that Israel will have indefinite overall security responsibility there. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said President Joe Biden still does not believe that the IDF reoccupying Gaza is good for the country. Kirby said while the U.S. agrees that it's impossible to go back to the pre-October 6th situation before Hamas launched its terrorist assault on Israel, the two allies don't have to agree on all operational strategies. However, the United States has repeated that it backs Israel's right to defend itself and will continue to provide support. Cho Hee-dae, Arirang News.
The U.S. has taken South Korea off its watch list of currency manipulating countries for the first time in 7 years on account of a fall in the current account surplus. Our Yoon has more on what this means.
South Korea has been removed from the U.S. government's monitoring list of foreign exchange policies after it had been on the list since April 2016. The U.S. Treasury Department released its semi-annual currency report on Tuesday, which reviewed the foreign exchange policies of its 20 major trading partners against 3 thresholds. They include a trade surplus with the U.S. of at least $15 billion, current account surplus of at least 3% of the country's GDP, and persistent net foreign currency purchases of at least 2% of GDP over a year. Countries that meet 2 of the 3 criteria are placed on the monitoring list to check for exchange rate manipulation against the dollar. South Korea and Switzerland were removed from the watch list, while China, Germany, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Singapore are among the 6 countries that remain. Vietnam was also put back on the list. The Treasury's report said no major trading partners appear to be manipulating the rate of exchange. South Korea was taken off the list mainly because the current account surplus fell, as exports plunged, and this impacts the current account surplus. One expert says the U.S. latest decision is both good and bad news for South Korea.
First of all, it shows the outside world that South Korea is now operating its foreign exchange market pretty fairly. So the positive aspect is that this increases Korea's credibility. But at the same time, because it means the current account surplus has significantly decreased, it also means that exports have not increased a lot.
The same expert also explained that because South Korea's current account surplus will not be significantly increased anytime soon, it's likely that it'll not be back on the list for the time being. 배은지, Arirang News.
South Korea posted another current account surplus in September thanks to some recovery in chip exports. Lower oil prices also play a role, making import prices cheaper. This trend is expected to continue for the rest of the year. Our economic correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
South Korea has managed to keep its current account in the black again in September. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Wednesday shows the country posted a current account surplus of $5.42 billion. This is the 5th straight month that a surplus was recorded, and it was even greater than in the month before. The surplus growth comes on the back of a recovery in exports and lowered global oil prices compared to the same period last year. The goods balance, which tracks imports and exports, saw a surplus of $7.42 billion last month, recording a surplus for the 6th consecutive month. The country exported over $55.6 billion worth of goods, an on-year decrease of 2.4% and the 13th straight on-year decline. By items, shipments of semiconductors are still below last year's figure, but the drop has been slowing down. On the other hand, the drop in imports was greater than that of exports as the cost of importing raw materials dropped due to lower energy prices. A rise in dividend income from Korean subsidiaries located overseas also contributed to the current account surplus. Meanwhile, the services account, which tracks earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, suffered an extended loss of $3.2 billion. Despite successive surpluses, the total surplus from January to last month is only around $16.6 billion, which is about 65% of the level for the same period last year. The BOK forecasts that the current account will continue to maintain a surplus in October and in the 4th quarter overall as well.
The surplus in the 4th quarter is expected to continue thanks to improvements in the semiconductor industry and strong car exports. But there's a chance the surplus may decrease compared to the 3rd quarter due to uncertainties in oil prices and potential increases in energy imports for winter heating.
He added that despite the uncertainties, the surplus for this year is expected to meet the bank's outlook of $27 billion. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And the government is looking to ease the red tape, hindering investment initiatives by companies in hopes of facilitating the country's economic rebound. An oil plant and a K-pop concert hall are to benefit from deregulation. Shin Se-byuk has more.
South Korea's government has pledged to ease regulations to expedite the investment project of major corporations as a means of supporting the recent economic recovery trend. This is according to Finance Minister Cho Kyung-ho in an emergency economic meeting on Wednesday.
To further fuel the ongoing economic recovery, the government will expand investments and promote consumption with the goal of revitalizing domestic spending.
To do so, the government rolled out tailored deregulatory measures for 18 private projects worth a total of 46 trillion won, or over $35 billion. Measures include law revisions to help South Korean oil refining company S-Oil secure construction sites for a large-scale petrochemical plant in the southeastern city of Ulsan as part of the $7 billion Saudi Aramco-backed Shaheen project. The refiner has been facing difficulties in securing sites for plant facilities such as storage yards and parking lots due to an act on industrial cluster development. The Sphere K-pop Arena project is also to benefit from the newly announced plan. Currently, the U.S. company is looking to break ground on the venue before 2025 in Hanam, just south of Seoul. The expected feasibility study period, as of now, is over 42 months, but the government's fast-track administrative procedures will shorten it by half. Special rules on hazardous material management will shorten the construction time for battery factories and reduce cost for South Korean battery makers. LG Energy Solution, SK-On, and others are planning to invest nearly 2 trillion won, or over $1.5 billion over the next couple of years to build new facilities in the Chungcheongnam and Pukto provinces. Other projects on the government support list include the establishment of a world-class art center branch in the southeastern city of Busan and a new airport in the country's southeastern region. 신세벽, Arirang News.
The nation's biggest startup festival, COMEUP 2023, began today with more than half of the participating startups coming from overseas. Correspondent Lee Soo-jin also sat down with the Minister of SMEs and Startups to talk about how to help local startups go global.
South Korea is ready for startups to make their mark. The country's biggest startup festival, COMEUP 2023, which will be held across 3 days, kicked off on Wednesday under the slogan, "We Move the World." Now in its 5th year, COMEUP, hosted by the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, is focusing on helping startups expand into global markets and providing them with various business opportunities. For the first time ever, most of the participating startups, 60% in fact, are from overseas. Continuing the global networking drive that began with President Yoon's state visit to the Middle East, global startups from 35 countries will be in attendance, including a 180-member delegation from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. To accommodate them all, there's a separate global zone set up, a new addition for this year. It stages company booths and country pavilions allow domestic startups to network and pitch to companies and officials from across the world. This year's COMEUP also features select local startups from various stages of development, giving them a platform to showcase their products. The festival also provides them with various opportunities for mentorship, networking, and investment. Arirang News sat down with the Minister of SMEs and Startups. She told us that this festival will highlight the strengths of South Korean startups.
South Korean startups are being recognized for their superior technology. For instance, in this year's CES, a quarter of the Innovation Award honorees were South Korean startups. In a digital era where new technology and businesses are needed, South Korean startups are already garnering much attention.
Also, this year's festival provides opportunities for startups to win what they need the most: capital.
At this year's COMEUP, there are 160 venture capitals from both Korea and abroad in attendance.
The minister added that she hopes that this festival will pave the way for more local startups to expand their business internationally, which will also help avoid business competition in the domestic market. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
President Yoon has nominated Cho Hee-dae to be the new Supreme Court Chief Justice. The 66-year-old has served in the role before from 2014 to 2020 and is known for having conservative views. Since then, Cho has been working as an endowed chair at Sungkyunkwan University Law School. This decision came a month after the opposition-controlled National Assembly rejected the Yoon administration's previous pick for the Chief Justice Lee Kyun-yong, marking the first such rejection in 35 years. The next step in the process will be a confirmation hearing, but no time frame has been given in that regard. With a growing number of students from different backgrounds in Korea, the National Assembly passed a bill last month providing a legal basis for special educational support for students from migrant and multicultural backgrounds. Today, we talk about this issue. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo is here with us. Welcome, Si-hoo.
Hi, Jungmin.
So you had a chance to speak with some of the students themselves.
Right, I recently met with students from many different countries at a Korean-speaking contest held here in Seoul. Let's take a look.
15-year-old Sophia moved with her family from Kazakhstan to South Korea.
한국에 온 지 1년이 다 되어가지만 아직 한국 생활 많이 어려워요.
In less than a year, she learned enough Korean to enter a speaking contest hosted by the Migrant Youth Foundation's Rainbow Youth Center.
그러나 저는 지금 학생이니까 열심히 공부하고 학교에서 한국 친구들도 많이 사귀며 미래의 꿈도 이루고 싶어요.
Nationwide, there are over 168,000 kindergarten, elementary, or middle school students with migrant or multicultural backgrounds. This is over 3% of all students. For these students, South Korea is implementing new educational programs.
By April next year, South Korea must come up with specific measures to support multicultural students' education. This comes as part of the revision to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act passed by the National Assembly in early October.
The legislation requires local governments to create special educational programs for multicultural students and also provides a legal basis for related research by the Education Ministry. Lawmaker Kwon Eun-hee, a member of the Assembly's Education Committee, proposed the legislation.
If the existing multicultural education was based on the understanding of Korea and was conducted in one-way consideration, I think we should now move forward in the direction of mutual respect.
Kwon suggests a way of learning that can highlight students' strengths.
We urgently need to establish dual language education in our system of multicultural education.
Lawmaker Kim Chol-min, the president of the Assembly's Education Committee, also underlines the need to teach both the language and culture.
In these global times, multicultural students have the advantage of knowing the culture and language of Korea and also where they were born and where their parents are from.
And helping them is the duty of the Korean government.
For these students to grow into competitive talent in Korea in the future, I think we need to provide them with an education system that helps them to adapt to Korean society and also know their culture at the same time.
The Education Ministry is set on establishing foundational Korean language courses by region as well as offering special scholarships for multicultural talents.
So, Si-hoo, South Korea must come up with specific measures by April.
That's right. The Education Ministry is trying to reflect these voices by taking a more holistic approach. Listen in.
We've previously taken the view that they're somewhat underprivileged in our society, that they're the children who need special help. But the biggest change now is that we're setting our policy based on the perspective that these students are part of our community and we're all growing together.
All right, thank you for the report. Keep us posted.
Thank you.
Warmer temperatures are in the forecast tomorrow. Lows will start up at 8 degrees Celsius in Seoul, but do expect a rise in daytime readings. Other regions will also see a gap in daily temperatures. The rise in daytime readings will lead to unstable atmospheric conditions. Starting tomorrow daytime, scattered outbreaks of rainfall are in store for most parts of the country. Western regions, including here in Seoul and parts of Gangwon province, will see around 5 millimeters. Jeju Island could expect about 5 to 20. In the meantime, gusty winds are in the forecast for all the coastlines. Winds will be gusting as fast as 10 to 16 meters per second. This will be conducive in creating high waves. For those fishing or boating, make sure to refer to the latest weather forecast. Morning temperatures in Seoul will be starting off at 8 degrees. Chuncheon will be cold at 4. Highs will be jumping significantly for the daytime. Seoul will get up to 17 degrees, Daejeon 19, Busan will make it to 21 degrees. Southern regions will see rain until Friday, and on Sunday, lows will be dropping to the negative territory. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Stories on site. From Korea to the world, and from the world to Korea. We ask questions every day that could change the world. Taking news a step further, Arirang News. You're watching Arirang News. You're watching Arirang.
Is learning Korean hard? We'll teach you Korean the easy way.
Really? There's an easy way?
All you need to remember is 4 words. K-chat, conversing in Korean.
떡볶이 매워요.
검은색 립스틱이요.
한국의 겨울엔 추워요.
위, 아래.
오, 잘 가요. 고마워요.
빨간색보다 노란색이 잘 어울려요.
Don't miss out.
Working in Korea?
Oh, that's a very
Keeping close tabs on you.
Children's laughter, hope, dream, K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. A number of well-known celebrities in South Korea are being grilled over drug use. The entertainment industry is anxious over the fallout from it. Among them is Lee Sun-gyun, an actor from the Oscar-winning movie Parasite. He's under investigation for alleged use of an unspecified drug. This came not just long after another actor Yoo-in's case this year March, who is on trial for illegal use of propofol. With film stars such as those being involved in drug-related investigations, the film industry that has already been struggling is facing another challenge. How is the movie scene right now, and are such drug scandals affecting the industry's image? For this, we invited Professor Cho, professor from Seoul Institute of the Arts, who is also a filmmaker. Welcome, Professor Cho.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. And we also have Professor Jason Betchervais, professor from Kyungdong University, who is also a film critic. Good to see you again, Professor Betchervais.
Hello, and thank you for having me all the way from Wonju today.
Welcome. All right, well, first question to our Professor Cho. Let's start with much lighter news than the drug scandal. Marvel Studios' much anticipated superhero flick, The Marvels, hit the local theaters today. What is this film about?
It's actually a sequel to Captain Marvel from 2019. And what they did was they combined that with what's on Disney Plus, which is also Miss Marvel. It's kind of more of a younger version of the show. So it's a combination of 3 Miss Marvel characters basically doing it. And it has Brie Larson, Tiona Paris, and Iman Vellani. And this is, I believe, the sort of a sequel to the 2019 version and also the 33rd MCU movie to come out. And of course, you know, we have a Korean actor, Park Seo-joon, in it. So, you know, it starts today in Korea. So basically, there's a lot of anticipation for it. But I do believe that the pre-sales for the movie is kind of, it's not up to par. And I think the reason maybe even in Korea there's fatigue for superhero movies is what I, you know, surmise. But we'll see if the movie, you know, has a really good story and it really hits the audiences. It might do well.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, our professors already mentioned, but Jason, the film was highly anticipated also in that actor Park Seo-joon from hit Korean series Itaewon Class and the movie Parasite starred in the film. Now, as far as I know, he became the 3rd Korean actor to join the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Yeah, that's right. It follows on from Claudia Kim. She starred in The Avengers Age of Ultron for 2015. That was a movie that was actually shot in Seoul. It was a huge gargantuan box office hit. And then there's also Madong-seok, or Don Lee, who is in The Eternals, that was released a couple of years ago, I think. And yeah, that didn't do all that well critically. It wasn't as well received as some of the other Marvel films. It sold around about $400 million, or generated $400 million in ticket sales. So that's not a bad tally, I suppose, compared to many other films out there, especially during the COVID pandemic. But I mean, as Professor Son mentioned, there is, I think, somewhat, well, definitely a tangible sense of fatigue when it comes to Marvel films. It's my impression that it peaked a few years ago with Endgame, and since then, and also Black Panther, and since then there's kind of been a downward trajectory in terms of the Marvel films that have been released here in Korea and also overseas. And ticket sales are just, for this film, you'd expect with a Korean actor, Park Seo-joon, in the film, you'd expect ticket sales to be really quite strong, and reservations so far are suggesting that it's going to have a somewhat soft opening. We'll find out later on today or early tomorrow how well it's done on its opening day, but it's just not looking to do as well. And I think people are just fed up with Marvel. They've just seen this thing time and time again. And I'm going to watch it tomorrow morning, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not on the edge of my seat. In excitement, wanting to see this film. It's just, it just feels like we're stuck in this kind of, I don't know, almost this black hole where we're trapped in this Marvel universe, and all we see is, these characters are going from one universe to another in different time, using different kind of, obviously using their superpowers, and time travel and all the rest of it. It's just not exciting anymore.
Right, I see your point, Professor Bechavis. Well, we'll have to see how it unfolds. Well, but Professor Cho, Park and other actors from the Marvels are reportedly doing no other, promotional activities, and some say this is because the SAG-AFTRA strike continues into late this year. Is this right?
Yeah, so it's not because Park Seo-joon doesn't want to do the promotions. I'm sure his company really wants to promote him, especially, it's exciting to be in a MCU universe as a foreign national. But I think, as you know, SAG-AFTRA is basically representation of almost all the Hollywood actors that we know of today. Screen Actors Guild is what SAG stands for, and AFTRA is another union of the acting. And right now they're trying to negotiate for a lot of things, including higher pay. They feel like because of streaming, the old model where an actor would be on an episodic television show or a movie and they would just keep getting residual payment, it kind of went out the window with streaming, because streaming doesn't really tell you exactly how much a show did in terms of box office numbers or Nielsen ratings. So the actors are really angry that they've been kind of cut out of the profits for a lot of these shows. So the strike is on its way. But I hear that the director's coming, because directors aren't really represented by SAG-AFTRA. The Directors Guild of America actually negotiated with the powers that be, and they made their own kind of compromise there, so it'll do it. But I think Park Seo-joon's company is kind of looking to see if Marvel says okay and Hollywood is okay about it, but I'm sure he would love to be out there promoting the movie.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, we started out by talking about the Marvels, but let's also talk about other films as well. Professor Bechavis, before the superhero film hit the theaters, what other movies were attracting moviegoers?
Yeah, no, I think it's been interesting looking at the box office over the last few weeks and few months. Certainly, it hasn't really been very impressive in terms of Korean films, although there has been the Love Reset comedy that's done very well. It's sold over, I think, 2 million tickets. Japanese animations have done really well in Korea this year. That's definitely been a trend. The Boy and the Heron, the latest kind of Studio Ghibli animation, which has sold, I think, 1.5 million admissions by Hayao Miyazaki. And I haven't seen that yet, but it does follow on from the success of other animations that we've seen this year. including Zuzemi and also the first Slam Dunk that did really, really well earlier on in the year. And also we've seen the Disney's Elemental that sold well over, I think, 6 million tickets this year. So there's clearly an appetite for animation out there. And I think as we look back at 2023, I think the success of animation or animated films will stand out. And unfortunately, Korea doesn't have a thriving animated film industry. So in that sense, it has been struggling somewhat. We've got The Boys by Chung Ji-young, which I haven't seen yet. That actually premiered at the Busan Film Festival last year. So it's taken a year for the film to get released. I haven't seen it. So I'm quite keen to watch the film. It stars Seo Kyung-gu, directed by Chung Ji-young. He's a very well-established filmmaker. He's been making films in the 80s and 90s, and he's behind the hits such as Unbound and also Black Market. So that hasn't been doing all that well. But so yeah, there's been, and following on from the Chuseok period as well, we saw Kim Ji-yoon's Cobweb that didn't do very well in cinemas. So the Chuseok period saw Korean films struggle, kind of following on from the summer. We did get some successes. We've got the Smugglers, which is one of the kind of few Korean films to break even this year. We also had Sleep, which came later on, that also broke even. But only, I think, 4 or 5 Korean films have actually made money at the box office in Korea, which I think just underscores the difficulty that Korean films are facing in cinemas right now.
Right, so it seems many of the South Korean movies were released recently, but not many of them were able to see good scores. Right, well, Professor Cho, among the many films our Professor Bachelvis already mentioned was romantic comedy 30 Days, although he didn't mention the name. And this stars actors Kang Han-il and Jong So-min and has been enjoying its popularity, and it even became the 5th Korean film to pass the break-even point this year. Why is it so popular?
Well, it's not a huge hit, but I think considering how, as Jason pointed out, there's so many movies that are doing so badly, just to break even seems like it's good news.
Yeah.
But I think my personal opinion about why it's doing well is because the premise is really simple. It's about a couple who's going through a divorce. They have a 30-day countdown until the day they get divorced, and they get in a car accident and they lose their memory.
Oh.
So the comic premise is a really good, simple premise. And I think right now, because of there's like wars happening in Israel, there's like Ukraine, also the economy and the inflation being up. I think comedies usually do well when the economy is doing badly. Just in terms of world cinema history, basically when the Big Depression in the U.S., there are a lot of golden musicals and comedies coming out of that era. So I think it would just kind of hit the zeitgeist. A lot of people are kind of want to go to the theaters and watch something to forget about how bad life is right now. So I think that's one of the reasons that it's done well. And also, and we talked about fatigue for Marvel movies, but there's also a fatigue for basically movies with gangsters and politicians, which there's been a whole slew of them coming out. So I think a movie about a silly couple, I think, just kind of hit everybody's kind of, nobody went expecting much, but I think they were very happily, surprised by the story of the movie.
Right, so simple comedy was the aspect that attracted many moviegoers, I guess.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Professor Bachelvis, other than 30 Days, Korean films that have recently been released were struggling, like you said before. As a matter of fact, live concert movies are enjoying more popularity than films, some say. Why is this?
Yeah, I would say that the English title for 30 Days, it's really confusing because there are always so many kind of English titles floating around when it comes to Korean films. It's called Love Reset. So I think that was what I mentioned earlier. So it is a little bit confusing. And yeah, it's now the 5th film to break even. So thank you for mentioning that. So not many movies that have actually surpassed that point. But yeah, going on to, looking at concert films. Now, I actually catalogue all the releases that are at hit cinemas in Korea. And as I've been looking at the films that have been hitting screens, concert films have actually not only been doing pretty well, but there's just been so many of them. 1 or 2 concert films that are released a month, and this is a trend that began, I think, not necessarily began in the pandemic, but it's certainly seen more concert films being released during COVID-19 the COVID-19 pandemic, because there just weren't any other films in theaters. But I think the Taylor Swift concert film has done extraordinarily well in cinemas in North America, and we've also seen films such as BTS yet to come in cinemas, which actually I think that was the first kind of concert film to surpass $40 million at the box office. And I think what you've got here, I think you've got obviously K-pop stars, you've got this part of the industry which has just done so well, not just here in Korea, but overseas. And, you know, these are well-established stars that have huge, huge draws at the box office. I mean, the star system has changed in Korea, but I think when it comes to K-pop stars, that's certainly something that audiences find appealing. And then we've also got the technology, and this is something that's not really talked about, actually. And I think this is something that's somewhat overlooked, is that Korea has this incredibly advanced theatrical circuit, you know, in terms of the cinemas here. And they pioneered technology, including ScreenX and 4DX and various other forms. And this kind of technology is well suited to concert films. And so one of the reasons these films are performing so well, and we saw this actually with the Avatar film, which is obviously not a concert film, but people are going to watch these films in premium formats, and as a result, they're actually making even more money. So I think that's part of the reason they're so popular. Is yes, you've got these popular singers, these well-established artists, but you've also got these cinemas that are actually ideal for watching concert films.
All right, I see. So there are so many reasons why we need to go to theaters to watch live concert films. But unfortunately, like we have already mentioned, other than certain films, other films are quite struggling. And what's making matters worse is that South Korea's film industry is being hurt by recent drug scandals involving big celebrities such as Yoon and previously Yoon. How many dramas or movies were they involved in, and how much damage did these scandals affect?
Well, Lee Sung-kyun, as you know, he's famous for, he's already a star in Korea, but, you know, he's world famous for being in Parasite. Yeah. He was in an Apple TV series called Dr. Brain, which basically did one season, and he shot the second season of that, which is about to come out in November. So now I think Apple's kind of worried. And then also he was in a movie called Project Silence. So these are projects that he already had shot that are about to kind of come out into the theaters or, you know, play on, you know, OTTs. But I'm sure it's going to really affect sort of, first of all, like, will audiences flock to see it? You know, that's like a question it's a big question mark. Also, they spend a lot of money on these projects. And for example, Dr. Brain, that's Apple TV, and you know, they put a lot of care into production values and things like that. And then Yoon, his case has gone on for a very long time, and it's affecting basically, you know, I think there's a movie he did called High Five, which is about to come out, which was already shot. And then there's a project, well, they shot the first season, Hellbound, which Netflix has officially dropped him. Well, his character kind of dies in the first episode, in the first season. So I don't think they're, you know, if they maybe wanted to kind of have him come back, but they've already dropped him for this purpose. And then I believe there's a thing called Goodbye Earth, which is another series, like a sci-fi thing that he's about to come out that's been shot. So yeah, it definitely puts a damper in terms of if you want to do promotions on new material that's coming out and then your star is involved in a scandal. It's not really good news for the entertainment business in a sense. But, you know, as we're going to talk about later, I think right now the drug thing seems like the major news item, and all the media is really sort of like fascinated by the stuff that's happening. I think Lee Sung-kyun's case is a little different from Yoon. You know, Yoon, it seems like it's like a very slow burning kind of scandal that happened earlier, but it's months later and we're still talking about it. Lee Sung-kyun is more about, basically he even tested negative on his drug test, and he was using sort of, I don't know if you could call it lighter drugs, but, you know, marijuana and things like that. So he also claims that he didn't really know that it was happening. So the two cases are really different, and I think maybe the audiences or Korean society will look at them differently. But right now, the focus is in Korean society is about all this like drug use. The government, President Yoon Suk-yeol actually announced that Korea is no longer a drug-free zone. Yeah, so it's something that's happening with the youth, even as early as I heard in middle school and high school in Korea. So I think it's a worldwide phenomenon. Korea is very strict about all this drug stuff. As you know, if you're caught, you could face up, basically from a minimum of 6 months to 14 years in jail. It's a very strict country about that, whereas I think in the United States, there's a different view of it, especially with drugs like fentanyl, which was, it's a drug that prescribed by doctors, basically, at one point, really made destroyed a lot of people's lives. So you have recreational drugs, of course, but in Europe and America, this problem has persisted for a very long time. And the way society looks at it over there is much different from the way Korean society looks at it, or most Asian societies. We're much stricter. So I hope that it kind of blows over for the sake of, the topic is how, is this going to have a negative impact on the Korean entertainment business? And it seems like it is right now, but it's doing so badly. This is not going to help, so those are things that I'm worried about.
Well, you have already mentioned how Lee Sang-yoon, both of the Lee Sang-yoon and Yoo-in are very well-known actors, even in the global society. And I'd like to ask you, some say that this could even damage the South Korean film industry's reputation. What's your view on this?
Personally, I don't think so, because they do represent, they're the face of what people watch. If Squid Game happened and let's say one of the actors from Squid Game was involved in a drug scandal, I think everybody would know about it. But at the same time, it really depends on which global audience finds out about that. I think if it's like in the United States and they find out the type of drugs they used and it's such common stuff. I mean, if you think about somebody's career like Robert Downey Jr., who plays Iron Man, that guy went to jail and came back after so much drug use, rehabilitated himself, and now he's like a world star, right? So we don't have this culture where we give forgiveness to people that do this. It's very strict, and government doesn't really have systems in place where if an actor or celebrity or just a normal person gets hooked on drugs, there's no process to go kind of rehabilitate yourself and find sort of a second chance in life. And this is something the government's looking into right now. But, just because you do something and you're punished for it, I think, a lot of times right now, what I'm finding is social media is working at its negative impact fullest because people are kind of, looking at this kind of in a weirdly, they're getting off on all this bad press. And if you look at anything from, in Korea, it would be like Kakao or any of the, like Instagram or any of the things. In the States would be, X or Twitter. They're just blowing up with people just kind of finding old videos of people in interviews and saying, I think he was on drugs on that. I mean, it's this kind of really perverted sense of what just a few of these kind of netizens are doing that's spreading out and causing the mainstream news to be picking up on it. So. Personally, I don't think it will blow over, but right now it seems like the focus is on this right now.
Well, it's quite reassuring to hear that this kind of scandals are not going to have much impact on the South Korean film industry's reputation. Good to hear. But Professor Jason, I'd like to ask you this last question quite briefly. Even if, Lee's case is one of several signs that South Korea is struggling with, illegal drugs cases. And we cannot guarantee that there won't be any second Yoo-in or second Lee Sang-yoon, right? In what ways should Korean film industry minimize such an impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict, right? I think obviously with the Lee Sang-yoon case, I mean, it's something that's emerged, and you can't predict that. I suppose they write certain conditions into their contracts with their agencies, but I don't know what you do if you've got a film or a drama, and then an actor is engulfed in a scandal. And it's very damaging. It's damaging for the production. It's damaging for everyone involved. and it can be incredibly stressful. So I'm not sure there's much one can do. I mean, it's not something that I think you can necessarily prepare for. With Lee Seung-gun, we've got Dr. Brain with a season coming up, and he's got films that he's in, and the same for Yoo, as Professor Sun mentioned. And it's very difficult. And so, yeah, I honestly don't know what you can do in that situation and how you can handle it. I suppose it's a case of just trying to handle it as well as one can, and seeing what happens as a result.
All right, thank you, Professor Betrovic. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Jason, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And Professor So, thank you for your time and insights as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Children's laughter, hope, dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends